Today, we're going to ask the question, is love even possible in Calvinism? Today, on Exegeting Calvinism and Provisionism. Greetings. Welcome back to Exegeting Calvinism and Provisionism. My name is Michael Faber, your exegetical guide. And today we're going to study the topic, is love possible in Calvinism? If you're interested in this topic, make sure you hit like on the way in. And if you like what you hear, subscribe to my channel so you get to hear more of my content. And certainly helps out the channel when you do. And so without further ado, first we're going to listen to RC Sproul.
But let's look for a moment at Edwards' definition of the freedom of the will. Edwards says that freedom, or free will, is the mind choosing. Now, what he's saying there is that though he distinguishes between the mind and the will, he is saying that the two are inseparably related. We do not make moral choices without the mind approving the direction of our choice. That is one of the dimensions that is closely related to the biblical concept of conscience. That moral choices are, that the mind is involved in moral choices. I become aware of certain options. And if I prefer one over the other, to have a preference before I can make the choice, I have to have some awareness of what those options are for it to be a moral decision. So that the will is not something that acts independent from the mind, but acts in conjunction with the mind. Whatever the mind deems as being desirable is what the will is inclined to choose.
Okay, so we have this idea that we are inclined by our mind. I think he's substituting mind for nature here, but that's fine. We are choosing by what we are inclined in our mind to do. Does he leave room for intent? Does he leave room for changing our desires? No, he doesn't. He says external circumstances can change what we desire, but what we desire, our strongest desire, is what we are going to do. So let's talk about this for a minute. Let's say you're a man who comes home and sees his wife and says, "Honey, you're as beautiful as the day that I married you." And she's like, "Oh, well, that's really nice of you to say." And then the husband says, "Well, you know, it's really good that I felt inclined to say that at that moment because I wasn't sure that I was going to. But you know what? My mind just inclined me to say it, and therefore I said it. I really didn't have any ability to desire otherwise. It's just what I said." Well, that's going to get you swapped over the head with a frying pan. But that's what the Calvinist is saying here, that a husband cannot say anything to his wife to express his love unless it is his strongest desire to express that. Now, you can say, well, he loves her and that's why he expresses that desire. Well, except that all of the decisions that led up to that point, from them meeting, from them liking each other, from them deciding to get married, all of those things just happened to come about because that was the strongest inclination of our mind at the time. Calvinism does not leave any room for deliberation, does not leave any room for considering maybe I shouldn't do this strongest desire. Doesn't leave any room for basically the contrary, the ability to refrain from doing something in particular. And so if you say as a husband, "Honey, you're as beautiful as the day we met," and as it turns out, that was what he was required to say because that was the desire that came up at that moment in time, is that love? Or is that just him going through the motion of doing what his desires said he was going to do? Because if you think about the entire process, living our entire lives by having our strongest desire determine what we choose, time after time after time after time after time, there's no input from us in terms of intent to turn those desires, to change those desires. Paul says very clearly, we're supposed to take every thought captive. That includes the desires that come into our mind. So if our strongest desire is to sin in any particular moment, we're supposed to capture that thought and change that desire. What Calvinism removes is the faculty of intent. Intent says, I can look at the desires and the possibilities and all the things that are around me and say, while I sometimes desire to do this, I may want to desire to do that, and the intent determines what desire we follow. The strongest desire does not determine our choice. And this is true of our human experience. How else would we be able to really deliberate something? What would be the point of deliberating if our strongest desire always determined the choice that we were going to make? 1 Corinthians 10 says that God provides us a way out of any sin. Well, if our strongest desire always determines our choice, then how do we get out of the strongest desire when that strongest desire is to sin? You have to be able to take that strongest desire captive and use our intent to say, while I desire to do this, this is my strongest desire, I am not going to do it. I'm going to intend to do something else. And this is actually how we break habits. Somebody has a smoking habit. Well, your strongest desire is to smoke that cigarette. And that's not just psychological desire, that's physical desire. Your physical body is saying, we need to have this cigarette. That's your strongest desire by far. That's why quitting smoking is so hard. But those who quit use their intent over and over and over again to resist the desire to smoke. That strongest desire, that almost compulsion that you feel to smoke. Long enough for the physical brain to change its chemistry and for the psychological brain to get away from the pattern of smoking in particular circumstances or upon certain feelings so that they don't feel that desire to smoke anymore. It's their intent that does that. It's not just, well, some strongest desire came up. It doesn't work that way. And I think we all know that that's the case. So taking this back to love, what is love really? Love really is making the choice every day, every hour, every minute, every second, if you have to intend to do what is right and loving for your spouse or for whomever you love every time. And we're not perfect. We don't do it 100% of the time. But our intent is what allows us to make that choice. And our intent is really what ends up being loving towards our spouse. If we have to do what our strongest desire is, how is that love? It just happens to be the thing that makes, chemicals go off in our spouse's brain. But if we intend, consider our options, look at the circumstances, and we say, I am going to act honorably. Not as a desire, but as a statement of our intent. And in spite of what desires come up in my mind, I am going to do what is honorable towards my spouse, towards my friend, towards God. This is what love is. Love is having a real choice. Love is saying, I have strong desires to do things, and I'm going to intend to not do them because I love my spouse. And so this is where Calvinists get it all backwards. They think that the desire causes the choice. That's incorrect. Our intent causes the choice. We may have desires that inform our choice, and our intent may say, this is what I desire, but that is an explanation, not a cause. And I think as we've seen pretty clearly that if desire causes, love is not possible. If intent, which is able to change our desire, causes, this is the basis for a loving relationship. And so that's it. That's my video for today on Calvinism and does Calvinism allow us to love? Again, if you enjoy what you've seen here, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. My name is Michael Faber. This is Exegeting Calvinism and Provisionism, and we'll see you next time.